Hi everyone, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Nick.
And you're listening to It Takes Two, a podcast where two people take two movies with the same plot or premise and watch and discuss them.
And in this episode, we watched Lion King 1.5 and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead.
Yes.
Did I do better this time?
You did. You're spoiling the facade here that we've had to re-record this intro. So Lion King 1.5 is basically Disney's answer to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and it fits in with the fact that we've just done two. Well, we've just done a fun episode, but before that we've done two Lion King episodes.
Yes.
So why not finish off the trilogy of sorts?
Just Disney stealing William Shakespeare's work to make movies out of it.
Yeah. Well, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern was Tom Stoppard stealing William Shakespeare work. So now Disney are stealing Tom Stoppard's fan fiction of Shakespeare.
So instead of the circle of life, it's the circle of theft.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or plagiarism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tom Stoppard notably also wrote Shakespeare in Love.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy that movie. Anyway, we're pretty rambly already.
I feel like it's going to be a relatively short episode. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot to discuss in these, but...
No, because the tones of both the movies are vastly different, even though they are based around the same sort of characters.
Yes.
The Timon and Pumbaa Strikes Back is very similar to, I think, in my mind, they very muchly ripped off Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yes, 100%.
Being that they have themselves in the audience watching themselves in a movie and then going, no, we have to skip through and no, we have to go back, and making like jokes the entire time.
Yeah, so it's very much kind of framed as... From the beginning, or initially, it's framed as Timon and Pumbaa doing their DVD commentary of The Lion King, the first movie.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, well, let's actually talk about how we were in it the whole time, secretly. You know, what we were doing during this scene. Yeah,
it reminds me of... did you watch Community at all? I don't remember.
Yeah. Oh, I never got to the end of it, but at one point in my life had watched maybe 3 seasons of Community.
Did you see the episode with Jack Black in it?
I don't remember.
Okay, because there's an episode with Jack Black in it, and
they're
trying to find an extra friend. Yeah,
it's like he's been in the background the whole time. I think that's very much. I feel like that is a reference to probably Rosencrantz, Guildenstern Are Dead as well.
Yeah. So tonally, obviously, you know, voice acting alone can't bring it through. But in comparison to watching Lion King 2. The budget felt better, maybe because they were using a lot of the old footage, but it's just very bizarre to me that you go from a sequel to try and make more profit on the original IP and just make it shitter so making it with lower budget to try and get some more money out of the same thing. And then we get this weird sequel, prequel, thing.
Parallel quill.
Parallel quill. Rogue One sort of esque movie.
Yeah.
And it's better quality done. The line work was done. The animation was done just in a more crisp, and there was some bits where it felt like it faded out a little bit, but then it wasn't so jarring as when we watched Lion King 2. That I was making mental notes of it through the entire movie. Yeah,
I was thinking this as well when we were watching it, because I think they wanted to use archive footage from the first film, and to do that they needed to have they needed to have quality that matched it. But we actually talked about this a little bit in the Lion King 2 episode, that they did something very similar with the Aladdin trilogy, that the middle one is the one that is known to be bad, worse animation, worse, they didn't have Robin Williams in it, the songs are terrible, and then the third one is actually really much more beautiful to look at and much more interesting to watch. Though I don't know that I'd necessarily say that Lion King 1.5 is more interesting to watch.
No, it just, for me, they introduced new characters, and we'll get into my headcanon which I came up with.
Oh God, we're gonna get into that
during watching it.
You were making the movie more interesting for yourself by basically writing fan fiction of it while it was happening.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to have to do a shortcut. RGAD, because I'm not going to be able to say that like multiple times without not screwing it up. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
What I mashed it into in my head, and I think I found it on like a Gary Oldman fan community in the mid 2000s.
Of course,
was Rosengill, but maybe that might be a fan fiction shipping name.
Okay,
and I've just shown my true colors.
Yes, the person who is not allowed to use Gary Oldman when it comes to 6 Degrees of Separation because you just instantly win.
Yeah. So Rosengill works.
Yeah,
for me as a shortening.
Rosengill.
Some people might hate us for
it's
doing
fine.
That.
You can put it in the comments below. Tonally, much better movie. Cinematography. Like I was expecting. I have a thing about not genre jumping, media jumping. Movies based on video games always suck. Games based on movies always suck. Like there's no, there may be one or two. Like I think maybe the first Resident Evil movie is okay, but there's that's probably it. Maybe there is. I have rewatched them. No, I have rewatched them. No, they're popcorn bullshit. I can't be bothered watching anything else movies. This, on the other hand, felt way more fleshed out, being that it was based on a play.
Mm-hmm.
The acting in it is fantastic. Two of my favourite actors from the era where they were just absolute powerhouses of Gary Oldman and Tim Roth. Rufus Dreyfuss is in it as well, which he's also fantastic in it. A very young... is it Ian Kane?
Ian Glenn?
Ian Glenn. For those, Game of Thrones fame. Just everything, the tone of the movie, the cinematography was really well done. It was quite jarring. Obviously, we did it last time with the fun episode, going from an animated movie to watching a live action movie. But, if this was the movie they're basing the Lion King 1.5 on, like, they missed everything that made it interesting. And it's not a dig. It's just an observation as a person who hadn't watched neither of the movies. It was just, like, tonally, it was not too dark for children. I'm not saying I'd recommend, you're like, oh, well, kid's bored. He's watched all of, I don't know, Arthur or... I don't know what's new.
Don't think kids are watching Arthur these days.
Powerpuff Rangers. And you're like, oh, we'll put this movie on. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't so dark. The darkness comes from your own mind trying to grab at answers rather than what's shown. It's you're being shown, not told, which is great narrative work. And it becomes this weird mystery that's sort of ongoing, because basically the opening of this movie is fantastic for a movie I'd never seen. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but it's fine.
It's all right. I think I'd seen both these before. Actually, watching like 1.5, I had like very little recollection of it, but I'm pretty sure I caught like some of it on the Disney Channel once. But I'm very familiar with Rosencrantz, Guildenstern are dead. So you continue your ramble.
The whole sequence where they're trying to, like, there's one of the ongoing, I don't know, have you seen the play?
I've actually seen my brother perform a version of the play. I've read the play.
Oh, yeah. Are they testing physics through the entire play?
No.
Or is that just in the movie?
So it's interesting because the movie, the play was adapted for screen by Tom Stoppard, the original playwright.
Yeah.
And he directed the film.
Yeah.
So I think what he said, from what I've heard, he's not 100% happy with it, but what he said was he made changes because he was the only person allowed to give his own work that kind of disrespect.
Makes sense.
So he used, because it's a visual medium where you can have all these kind of visual gags happening. I mean, not that stage isn't. I think, there's definitely, in the play, there's definitely these hints that Rosencrantz isn't as stupid as he seems.
Yeah.
Because the whole kind of riff on them is that Guildenstern is more analytical, so it's just kind of assumed that he's like the more intelligent one, but they're both pretty stupid.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Rosencrantz does actually have like a level of intelligence that just it goes completely over people's head because he's not, vocalizing it so much.
So he's the Pumbaa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they, so I feel like they added a decent amount. I feel like maybe a couple of them are in the play. It's been a while since I read it, but I think they like added a bunch of stuff to it to have these like visual gags and stuff to be like, here's 100 times that Rosencrantz is on the brink of a scientific discovery and no one listens to him.
Yeah. No, the probability of flipping a coin and getting a head's 170 something times, which was like the beginning part, and there's just the existential dread that they're feeling of like, what do you remember?
Yeah.
Like, what's the first thing you remember? No, it's too long ago. No. Literally, after all that, what's the first thing you remember? Oh, there was a messenger.
Yeah.
How did we get here? Like, what's going on? And they're like, let's go to the place we're supposed to be going to. It's like, why are we going there? Like, and all of this, and the players turning up, and them being on stage, and then the scenes changing. Like, I'd love to see the play now. But just absolutely fantastically done.
We can find a way to watch it. I discovered it looks like a recent or relatively recent I think West End. No, not West End. I don't know. It might have been Globe Theatre production of it, starring Daniel Radcliffe in one of the lead roles. Was filmed. So we'll see if we can get our hands on that to watch it, and you can watch a stage version of it. It's really, really good play. It's very interesting because it's obviously, the idea is in a Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern just show up a handful of times, and they're always doing what they've been told to do.
Yeah.
So they come across, I think, as maybe malicious, whatever, because you don't know what their intent is, because they're just doing what whoever was last speaking to them told them to do.
Right.
And then, they're gone for a while, and then at the end when everyone is spoiler alert, it's Hamlet, everyone knows this, at the end when everyone is dead, the messenger comes in and is like, I've brought the news from England, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and you're like, what? Like, why? Why does that matter? So Tom Stoppard has taken these characters
and a throwaway line and then built an entire
and it's this idea of like, what if they were always doing what they were told because they only exist in this context and they can't, and so they spent the whole play trying to figure out why they're there, what they're doing, how they get out of here, how do they get back to having a normal life, what is a normal life, and there's also the other thing with productions of Hamlet is that every time, or it's like tradition that every time Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are on stage, they've swapped roles.
Right, yeah.
So you get that whole, existential part to it that, like, they're not sure which of them is which.
Yeah.
And there's the first time they introduce themselves, Rosencrantz introduces them to the players, and he's like, I'm Guildenstern, this is Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern just does a little, like, head shake, and he's like, he's Guildenstern, I'm Rosencrantz. But then every time, I think Hamlet's the only one who addresses them correctly, but every other time they meet someone, they get them wrong, and then someone else corrects them, so that they're always being both addressed by both names, just to be doubly confusing.
The thing that I really enjoyed more, I'll give you an example. Viewers at home, I'll tell you a little what I have an issue with. The dialogue between Timon and Pumbaa is Timon setting up a joke, Pumbaa giving him the beginning of the punchline and then him ending it, and it feels like it's just two writers in a room brainstorming.
Yeah.
Where the dialogue in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead is everything is very quippy. They're very quick. Everything is like boom, 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 and you're laughing from a joke that was lined up 30 seconds ago, but the payoff is now halfway through the next joke, and it is just fantastically done. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Am I on the right ball here?
Yeah, I understand you.
Yeah. There's a scene where they play tennis, but they're doing questions and answers.
Mm.
So if you answer with a statement or a double up or a
rhetorical question,
or
a non sequitur where you've gone into a different topic.
Yeah, you lose a point, and then playing tennis to each other was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
because it was so punchy and so well done, and the because obviously the budget for me it just felt very low. Obviously they'd gotten a space that they could film in, and they're using the same couple of rooms over and over again, and the techniques they've used to show that they're just as confused is fantastic, because they're walking into a room and then coming out the other side of it, and then they're like, we're lost, and then like people, and then you're drawn into the sequence. And I think it's probably related to being a play, because obviously you can't do a lot of set changes, because otherwise it's jarring for the audience.
Right,
like, hang on guys, we just have to change out like 97,000 things, hang on, like, it's not Circus du Soleil.
But it's clever because they also have a set change with them still on stage in this.
Yes.
Like, so there's a bit where they're on like this, they've met the players outdoors and they're standing on the player stage, and then suddenly they're inside.
Yeah.
And like it's just like the curtain falls on them, and we're indoors, and you know, stuff is happening. They're in the middle of a scene that happens, I think, off camera, well not off camera, off stage in Hamlet.
Yeah.
And then they're just kind of looking around like, because the cut is so jarring, but then they're just standing there and they're looking around like, how do we get here? Did we just teleport? But then they just kind of accept it. It reminds me, and maybe it's just because we've rewatched it so recently, but it reminds me a bit of Inception, of the like, you know, how did we get here? Yeah. Do you remember actually coming to this place? You know, and it's like you have that dreamlike state of like, oh, we were always there, which is what that, you know, they're trying to get to. And they've obviously realized that they're both in this. But even, you know, they were sent for because they're Hamlet's friends from childhood, but they don't remember that.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to get out the whole time. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. So I think we've focused a lot on the good movie. Let's go back to Lion King. 1.5.
Yeah.
So to me, less about boyard chums. It is about an interracial gay couple who adopt an abandoned orphan.
Yes.
And without being that I have, like, you know, a very close friend who is Jewish. It came off to me, being that I've observed his relationship with his family, and obviously, you know, there's which Stiller is it? Sorry?
Jerry.
Jerry Stiller playing his uncle. Mm-hmm. The Meerkats came off as a Jewish community to me. Him being the very overloved child by his single mother. His uncle always being there trying to give him advice, but very sternly. The overwhelm of dread that the community feel like they're being constantly prosecuted, and then him being sort of ousted out of the community because he doesn't fit in. And there's a lot that I've seen within the Jewish community in New Zealand that is very similar, where you just don't fit in. You're like, oh, bye, like, you don't come to temple. And it was just interesting for me because in my mind I was just like, oh yeah, she might as well just said, you know, some Yiddish in there and it would have just been perfect. I think the archetype for me of the interracial couple adopting a orphan it's been overused maybe a little bit, because it's basically the entire premise of A Force Awakens, about an interracial couple who adopt an Asian child who's then running away from a white guy with a burning cross.
What?
Force Awakens.
That's the plot of The Force Awakens?
Yes, there's the plot of Force Awakens.
Oh my god, okay.
Is it you oh my godding because all the pieces are falling into place, or you oh my godding is because I'm insane?
Both. I can understand.
Insanely correct.
I know what you're describing.
Yeah.
But I would never describe it that way.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and in Hamlet originally, those characters grew up with Hamlet.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Lion King series, they essentially raised Simba. He was still a cub when he met them.
Yeah.
And they raised him.
Yeah.
And then they're, all sleeping in the same bed together, and Timon and Pumbaa share a same-sex kiss in a Disney movie in the early 2000s.
You take that, Buzz Lightyear or whatever the hell it was that got friggin' hate on Twitter because people are morons.
Yeah, it's sorry, I know you're also-ing, but I was going to say, more importantly to this whole theory is the fact that Timon is voiced by Nathan Lane, who is like openly gay man.
Yeah. Also the fact that he only the whole like Kuna Matata, see more than what you can see with your eyes.
Yeah.
And this whole concept of him going to go find himself, and he only finds himself when he's in this relationship, and it's like kind of beautifully sad. But the point I was going to make, which I've now lost because you also'd me.
Oh no.
What did I say before you also'd?
You just said also. I was talking and then you said also.
Oh right. What were you talking about? Sorry.
Them raising Simba and sharing it openly. We're a same-sex.
Oh yeah. I'm calling out Disney right now. The inability for you, Disney, to make Poe Dameron and Finn gay for each other was really disappointing as a straight man who used to love Star Wars. Maybe the EU is still like Mandalorian is fantastic. Book of Boba Fett was fine. Wasn't great, and it was just more like, let's put Mandalorian in there because otherwise everybody wants Mandalorian. We all know how we feel about Kenobi. Cash grab. But yeah, just having this where it seems to be like a big deal, and I don't understand it. Like, my generation is a generation who was just like, shut the fuck up, gay people are real, like, deal with it. And now we're sort of going backwards where, like, I grew up watching so many shows with, like Will and Grace.
Will and Grace was, like, a real outlier at the time.
Yeah. I can't remember the lady's name, and I used to watch her all the time, and I had no problem with it as a kid because bigotry is taught not natural.
Because Ellen's show ended, I think. Ellen nowadays not a person to talk about, but at the time, Ellen in her sitcom was, the first beloved sitcom character to come out as openly gay.
Yeah.
And then it kind of tanked afterwards. So it was a real big risk for them to do Will and Grace.
Yeah.
And apparently originally they were going to have them as just like side characters and have it focus on like a heterosexual couple.
Yeah.
And then they were like, no, let's, or I think a whole lot of networks turned it down because there was gay people in it. And then the one that picked it up was like, I like this concept, but let's make them the main characters.
Yeah.
Let's cut this stuff out and let's focus on these people.
Because if I said Dane Edna to you, do you know who I'm talking about?
Dame Edna Everage?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Good. I used to love that shit. Like, I used to watch it all the time.
She was in Ally McBeal for a while.
Yeah.
Ally McBeal was a weird show.
It's just weird to me. But anyway, yes. There's a difference between the two characters, and I think, Timon and Pumbaa finding each other. Timon getting a massive flushed out backstory, but Pumbaa just going like, I just fart and no one likes me.
Yeah, it was really weird. Because like the whole beginning of the movie ended up being Timon's backstory, which we didn't even need to know about, to be perfectly honest. Except for you, so you can write your Jewish Timon fanfiction.
It's not fanfiction, it's headcanon.
I just thought that they just like kind of recycled Flick from A Bug's Life a little bit.
Yeah.
That he was, the one that was trying to do creative stuff but failing everything and wasn't set out to do the menial tasks that everyone else was doing and blah, blah, and had to go off by himself.
Yeah.
Except in the end, he brings the meerkats to where him and Pumbaa now live rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just didn't understand why they needed to do a whole fleshed out Timon backstory. And then especially when Pumbaa's backstory is just the throwaway bit in Hakuna Matata from the first movie, where he just was a young warthog that used to fart and people didn't want to be around him.
I did like the part where he's like, I don't do well in crowds, and then farts, and then the rhinoceroses fall over, and all the other animals, they're all surrounding Pride Rock while Simba's being held up by Rafiki. It's like, oh, they're all bowing. Let's all bow too.
Yeah, it's like, oh, the rhinos are bowing. Let's bow.
Yeah.
I like that because that's the start of like a whole sequence of where they actually do the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern stuff.
Yeah,
kind of, because it's like it's them interacting with a whole lot of scenes from the first movie where you see it from their perspective and they don't know what's going on and it's a bit weird and they're like they've knocked down the pile of animals during Just Can't Wait to Be King.
Yeah.
And then they were in the gorge when the stampede came through and
Yeah, they're sort of like just in the background, off camera, throughout all the like major plot points up until they're introduced. Yeah,
and you get that in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead because you do get them being in the room when there's other stuff going on that happens in Hamlet that they're not there for, and they're kind of like, what's going on? It's like, why are Claudius and what's his name? It doesn't matter. Why are they having this conversation? What's happening? And and then. Or Ophelia and the whatever, there's just all this stuff happening that they're just kind of like looking at because they ended up there and then they're like real awkward and trying to get away from it.
The physical comedy comes off much better than it did in Lion King. Because, obviously with cartoon characters and anything animated, you can sort of juggle with physics in a way where they can do things that would be very painful in reality or be physically impossible. And I think the physical comedy of just the portrayal with Tim Roth and Gary Oldman just works so much better. Just not just visually, like viscerally, it just feels like it's not slapstick. It's not in a way that I would feel is taking anything away, but it's just like the little bit of salt and pepper that it needed, just to sprinkle on top. It's in the dish. Yeah. You just need a little bit more when it's done cooking.
I think they work really well together as actors. Just the second film they'd been in together because they were in a British indie film called Meantime in I think it's like 83 or something.
Oh, okay.
And
of course you'd know that.
Yes, I have it on DVD.
Yeah.
But I think those are the only two things they've been in together, which is a shame because they're both fantastic actors, and I'd happily watch them be in more films together, even nowadays, which is 30 years on from that. It's interesting because I think at the time that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead was made, they had both started to become quite big actors.
Yeah.
And were, I think, largely doing serious stuff or like films where they were villains and things. So it was unusual for them to do like a comedy together.
Yeah, it's interesting with that was me. It was interesting watching being knowing other works are done. Like Gary Oldman, I could, name 5 Gary Oldman movies you have to watch before you die kind of BS.
Right, I thought you were going to say you could only name 5 Gary Oldman movies, and I was like, but I've seen like 58 of them.
Yeah, I know you have. This is why you're not allowed to use Gary Oldman.
He's just very good for 6 Degrees of Separation.
Okay, on that subject, which is your favourite performance by Gary Oldman?
By Gary Oldman?
Yeah.
Ooh, I've always been, I mean, this is a cop-out answer for me probably, but I've always been a fan of Norman Stansfield and Leon.
I knew you were going with Leon.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because you don't have a majority, or you don't have many of your collection here in NZ, obviously, because it's a stupid thing to travel with.
Yeah, especially before I had like a residency.
Yeah. There are only a couple of double ups in the collection now, which is we've got 3 copies of Leon,
yes,
and then several copies of Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So I knew that was going to be your answer.
Yeah.
But Tim Roth.
What's my favorite Tim Roth film?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was going to say something real obscure there, but I don't even know if it's true. I was going to say The Legend of 1900.
Never seen it.
It's a film where he plays a pianist who lives on a boat.
It seems like a dumb place to keep a piano. Come on.
I don't know. I've seen a decent amount of Tim Roth films. I mean, you know that I love 4 Rooms.
Yes.
I think he's fantastic in that.
Yeah.
He's so good. I mean, because he's like proper manic in it. It's so good.
Yeah.
But I watched Lie to Me when that was out, and I really loved him in Lie to Me.
I think his performance in Reservoir Dogs really, like, even next to Steve Buscemi, Harvey Keitel, Michael Madsen, like, he stands out being like the most. I think his character just has the biggest range in the movie. Not maybe not like maybe if the other actors had gotten parts where they could play each side, maybe it'd be better. But I'm just saying his character, the arc he goes through, he has the biggest range of things and emotions, and for that it brings out a powerhouse performance. But I would have to agree that Theodore from 4 Rooms is by far my favorite performance. But yeah,
it's so good. He's just perfectly manic, and I mean he holds that movie together.
Yeah, I know in my mind that what happened was when we mentioned 4 Rooms, Floyd, who's listening to this episode, went ice. Even I don't know why people don't. Well, obviously, I'm going through I'm like 3 conversations ahead of myself in my own head.
That's all right.
Why don't more directors do compilation movies anymore? Because I think the last one I remember seeing, but it's not even true, was Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino with the Grindhouse thing.
There's been a few. So you mean like anthologies?
I just mean like 4 Rooms where you take 4 individual stories and then slap them all together with like overarching characters and callbacks and. Yeah,
so I feel like there's been a few anthologies or like things like that, like ensemble cast things where there's different storylines going on. Like I Love Actually.
Oh yeah, that's
things like
true.
That. There was like a New Year's version of that and a Valentine's version of that. And there's been...
Let me guess, hang on. If Love Actually is just a Christmas movie, you've got the New Year's Eve one, which would be Resolutions, actually. And then...
I think it's just called New Year's Eve.
Okay, and then
I can't remember what the Valentine's one is. But there's definitely a few films like that. What was that one? Movie 43?
Oh my god, that is... It is like...
That's that's very much an anthology.
That is a very... For those who haven't seen movie 43, I would highly recommend watching movie 43 alone when you can't think of anything else to watch, because you don't want to explain and you don't want to be caught watching it. I'm not saying it's explicit. There is some parts in it that are super weird.
Yes.
It is not the kind of movie you want someone to walk in on halfway through and being like, what the fuck are you watching?
Yeah,
because you do not want to explain that.
Yeah, because there's a whole bunch of weird sequences.
It is taking very famous... It's capturing what Scary Movie 1 through 3 did in a bottle, shaking it up with a bunch of Red Bull, and then just, like, popping the cap and just spraying everywhere. Like, that movie is... bananas nuts.
Yeah.
Like, Hugh Jackman... Sorry. No, I'm not even going to say what Hugh Jackman has or does, or very fantastic and funny performances from a very young...
was it Chloe Grace Moretz?
Chloe Grace Moretz, and you've got the guy who was in Superbad. I can't remember his name. Damn it, I'm sorry.
Which one? I'm trying to remember who's in it. Not the guy who plays McLovin, was it? No.
No.
Who? Is it Michael Cera?
No. Anyway, Patrick Thorburton's in it, like... Warburton?
Warburton.
What did I say? Thorburton.
Thorburton.
God.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's just one of those movies that you just have to watch at least once in your entire life.
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting movie.
Yeah.
But I suppose not what we're talking about right now. But my point was that there are, like, anthology movies. Yeah. They're just not usually super mainstream.
Makes sense. Directors out there do more.
Love Actually is. But Four Rooms is very much, it's for...
individual stories from individual directors.
Exactly. So there's separate 4 stories. It's an anthology series of 4 stories by different writers and directors with different actors in it that happen in the same hotel on the same night. And Tim Roth is the bellhop, and he's in all of them.
Yeah.
And he's having the most ridiculous night of his life.
Yes.
Anyway, should we get back to the movies that we're actually talking about?
On the last point of what you just said, what was that show? You know, it was like the Restaurant Rescue, where they used to go around to restaurants and like tidy up and do like new designs and stuff. But then there was also like a spin-off where they went to like weird bed and breakfasty, like small ma and pa hotels.
I don't know what show this is.
Oh, okay. Well, it was a show. Yeah, let's go back to the movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where were we?
Where were we? Best performances by Gary and Tim. We've covered that. Best stereotypes of a minority religious group with...
like a 1.5.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we're up to date there.
Yeah, so we've talked about how interesting Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is, and liking 1.5 is supposed to be like an homage to it, but it's not. It doesn't quite.
Yeah, no, it feels like an homage to Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's definitely a deliberate reference.
If it had been like a throwaway in the beginning, like they're in the movie theater and watching it and being like, no, rewind, we have to start from the beginning. Oh no, would we get to the part where we come in? Yeah. Like, if that had been the only part of the movie that movie theater audience sequence had been in,
yeah,
it would have been fine.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they keep using it, it literally became Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah, and it's even like they, pause the movie at dramatic moments and go to the toilet and stuff, and it's like, okay,
yeah,
cool, this is a great time for a joke, I guess.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah. It
was a very weird tonal pace.
I never liked the fact that, because in the first Lion King film, you kind of get the impression that Timon and Pumbaa have been living this lifestyle for a long time together. And in this film, it's literally like the day that they find this place. So literally, their whole thing is that...
No, because that's the weird thing. Because I agree with you a little bit, but I'm going to have to interject there. You mentioned when we'd finished the movie, or possibly during the end third quarter of the movie, the time skips are super weird.
Yeah.
So it's because you show there's quite a little bit of very young Simba, like as in when they've just got together. Then there's the middle part where he's sort of got some of a mane, but not quite.
Yeah, it's like
teenage Simba. And then it's a fully adult Simba right before they meet Nala.
Yeah.
And in the background, his mother, voiced by the same voice actor who voiced Marge Simpson, is looking for him. And then I made that joke that Jordan told me once, which was fantastic, which I won't put on here. And that whole like background of like how much time has gone past, because what was it, 2.5 years before lions reach sexual maturity?
I'm not sure. Did you look it up?
Is that not common knowledge that everybody knows?
I know, I just wasn't sure the exact time frame of it.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were asking me, and I'm like, I didn't have that information in my brain.
Oh, okay. Well, I do.
Okay.
So anyway, it's approximately 2.5 years before the lion reaches sexual maturity.
Okay.
I was doing my doco narrator voice.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Are you Googling it?
Yeah, it says 2 years old.
Yeah. So they've been together for 2 years. So the whole, you're right and wrong at the same time. It's a how long have they been together before Simba arrives? Because they've obviously they've become bored with just hanging out in the jungle. They're making up weird games. So obviously they've been there for...
But it doesn't make any sense, because the day that they find their jungle, or the day that they find their jungle thing is the day after the stampede. And when the stampede happens, Simba runs away, ends up in the desert, collapses from heat exhaustion, and is found by Timon and Pumbaa. It's the same day.
You're right.
So it doesn't make any sense. The time frame makes no sense. So literally, they meet each other on the day that Simba is born.
Yeah.
And then they get to like the watering hole on the other side of Pride Rock, and then suddenly Can't Wait to Be King is happening, even though that's not immediately after Simba was born, that's several months later. And then, they go to the elephant graveyard at the same day that Simba's there, and then they go to the gorge this day of the stampede, and then they find their place and they sing their Hakuna Matata song, and they're, doing stuff, and then they find Simba, but it's the same day that they got there. It doesn't make any sense. Because they bring him back to this place and they show, teach him how to eat bugs, and they're all, teaching them their way of life, but they only literally made the way of life that day.
So what you're now explaining is they are more closely linked than I originally thought. Because the time skipping in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead is very, sub-reality.
Absolutely true, yeah. Yeah, there's location and time jumps in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead that don't make any sense, really. And, the same thing is happening in like 1.5.
Well, we've done it, folks. We've finally taken toed it. We've matched 2 movies together. We can all go home, have a beer, celebrate.
We are home, and we don't drink.
That's true.
Oh my god.
We have to keep doing this podcast for years until we run out of movies.
Yeah, so it's weird. Just the time doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the whole point, like you said, because there's an homage to Rosencrantz, Guildenstern are dead, which is very much commenting on the fact that time makes no sense on stage.
Yeah.
And that, the stage can change around you, and you're just standing there like, was I here a second ago? Like, what is happening? And, people are talking, they talk to the king, and he's, telling them about, like, why he sent for them, and then they're like, but, like, they just take what anyone says as truth because they have no memories to counteract it.
Yeah, it was very fascinating watching it for the first time. I
Yeah.
don't think it'd be something I'd reach for again for like... Sorry.
I wonder if the mic is picking it up. His stomach just made like a gurgly noise if the mic didn't pick it up.
It does that. It is active. It always hungers. It'd be something I'd pick up again in like maybe 15 years time. Just randomly like, oh, yeah, I should do that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not something I'd put on the calendar.
Right.
Like we have with several movies that we watch annually.
I'm just thinking that my mom is probably not going to be happy with this episode because she really doesn't like this play.
Okay.
And we went to see it. Like I said, my brother performed in it, and it's literally, there's two main characters in this. There's basically for most of it, there's only two people. So her son was on stage for the entire thing, and like he would look up into the audience, and she'd be checking her watch, falling asleep. She's very supportive. She loves like every other piece of work he's ever done, but she will straight up tell anyone that she does not like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. She thinks it's like the worst play of all time. I really enjoy it. I think the writing is really clever.
Yeah. I was trying to think of a worse play, but my mind went blank.
I'm sure there are worse plays.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say box office and budget, but there's a running theme with these. Straight to VHS and straight to DVD movies don't really explain how much they cost and how much they made because it's probably incalculable by even their distribution.
Yeah.
Because, if a company, say, I'll just take JB Hi-Fi because it's the one I always jump to, buys X amount of copies of said movie at full price when it comes out, and then 6 of them throughout the nationwide stores or international, well, it's actually international, end up in the bargain bin, like, but they pulled, they're paying less, $5 for what was the one that I always used to buy 3 for $20 from the warehouse. Like, I know for a fact it costs $2 to make a DVD, including case, and that's without shipping. So if you're selling it for $5, how much did you buy it for in the first place?
Yeah.
So we'll go to IMDb trivia, shall we?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot, to be honest. And even like that, like you said, with the budget and box office, like I just didn't even bother taking it down. I couldn't find budget for either of them. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, but considering box office was not a thing. I think because I had a quick look, and I think IMDb listed Lion King 1.5's box office as like $1,500 or something.
But if it didn't have a movie release,
I don't know. I don't know. And
how does it have a box office?
I think Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead was like 700,000 or something equivalent to that, something around that, I think. But again, it didn't really matter because I don't have budgets for them, and they're not really. You can't compare those numbers. In terms of trivia, not a whole lot. The only piece of trivia I took down from Lion King 1.5 was that they framed it like an episode of Mystery Science 3000, which we've talked about 100 times.
Well, maybe not 100, that'd be hyperbole, but...
In terms of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, pretty much all of the trivia was about casting.
Right.
So first of all, when Gary Oldman and Tim Roth were originally cast, they were cast the other way around.
Makes sense.
Which is funny because that's like a whole plot
meme
thing in the movie is that they do keep mixing themselves up.
Yeah.
But they had originally been cast in opposite roles. Tim Roth was cast first. So he was cast as Rosencrantz first, and then when they were looking for someone else, he suggested Richard E. Grant, which would have been an interesting combo. And then ended up going to Gary Oldman. They had originally cast Sean Connery as the player king.
Right.
But he ditched the film because he was cast in The Hunt for Red October, which had a bigger paycheck.
Yeah, of course it did.
Which makes sense, because he probably would be much more well known for that than he would ever have been for Rosencrantz, Guildenstern are Dead. At one point they were trying to get Sting to play Hamlet. I think that would have been fun.
Yeah.
Because it's 91, so it would be, 5 years after Dune?
Yeah. God, he's so good in Dune.
So it'd be fun to have Sting.
Do you know, I was thinking, sorry, on that Sting note.
Yeah.
I am so excited for when Dune Part 2 comes out. Because I just, I know you were like, the entire movie felt like a giant trailer.
Yeah, the entire movie was a trailer for the next movie.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Like, I was on the balcony the other day thinking of it, and I was like, send more Dunes.
Send more Are we? Yeah, we'll have to call the episode that.
Yeah. It's now a headcanon within the fan club. The two is...
Or send in the Dunes.
Yeah. Send in the Dunes.
Oh my god. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead as a play was written in the 60s.
Right.
And they had planned a film adaptation of it in the 60s. But then MGM never greenlit the movie, so MGM had bought the rights for $200,000.
Of course they did.
And then they never made the movie.
Of course.
And then Tom Stoppard ended up making his own movie in the 90s.
Yeah.
But the cast that they wanted for the it would have been 1968. They wanted Michael Caine and Terence Stamp to be Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I think that would have been an interesting movie to watch.
Michael Caine and anything.
Yeah, so they were going to have then Laurence Olivier as the Player King, Albert Finney as Claudius, Maggie Smith as Gertrude, and then they were going to also have Donald Sutherland and Elliot Gould. Yeah, that would have been a really interesting cast.
Yeah, it's like, have you seen the cast list for if they'd made Avengers in the 90s?
Oh yeah, but that's not like they were actually planning to do it. It's just people...
You reckon they weren't planning? I reckon they were just waiting until the CGI got good enough.
No, maybe. But those aren't like casts that had been like planned for it. Those are people saying this is who would have been these roles.
True, maybe.
And then the only other note I had was that Tim Roth had been considered originally for the role of Severus Snape in the Harry Potter films. Which is fun because then obviously Gary Oldman played Sirius Black.
Yeah.
And Daniel Radcliffe and Timothy Spall both have played Rosencrantz in stage productions.
Everything's linked through Shakespeare.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of British actors do through Shakespeare.
Yeah, because that's real acting.
Yeah.
No offense to Americans and their Disney kids' school of drug addiction and screwed up childhoods, but I think to be a real actor, I think you have to stay on stage and go and, show your chops and not just be like generic child with brown hair stand in front of these disgusting child-hungry
I do
producers.
think Daniel Radcliffe started out as generic child with brown hair standing in front of producers. That's how he got his start. Yeah, but that's
I'm saying like as adults where you're like, I'm going to be an actor.
Yeah.
That's why Sir Patrick Stewart's performances in Star Trek alone were just like a next level above Shatner. Because Shatner was just like, Shatner. There's no, it's like trying to put Nicolas Cage in a bottle, like you in a box. You can't label that. Like Shatner, especially because he leaned heavily into it further and further into his career.
Right.
But yeah, just in the comparison, like no, you never will, but if you watch the heights of them, the perfect example is Generations. Sorry, I'm going on a random tangent here.
It's okay.
If you watch Generations and you look at the acting difference, like Shatner's good for his age and where he is in his career and coming back to a character he hasn't played in several, versus Picard, Patrick Stewart, who was playing a character he'd been playing for literally years up to that point. Just like the stream dominance, I think, is just a little bit better when you're a true thespian.
Thespian, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's the Gary Oldman cameo in Friends.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
You have to enunciate.
Yeah, when they're just spitting in each other's eyes.
Yeah. Because that's how you do proper acting.
Yeah.
You just keep spitting at the other person. If
Ross, the largest of the friends, why didn't you just simply X the others?
All right, on that note, is there anything more you want to add about the films, or you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I'll wrap up. I think there's a nice, nice finale to it.
Okay, fair enough.
I've been Lisa. You've been Nick. Thank you for.
No, hang on, that's Hear Us Out. Wrong podcast. Yeah, so if you want to find us on social media, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at ittakes2_pod, or on Facebook at ittakes2pod, and our website is ittakes2.co.nz.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you with our eyes next time.
Goodbye.